Joe Brand,
Hello.
if you were actually a brand, what would your product or service be?
My product or service would be a sort of gas that you could spray over men to make them respect women. Hey, what a great gas that would be! And you'd have a specially designed gun that was very feminine for women to use.
What would the gas do?
Well, it would just make men. And I'm not including all men in this, but there's a section of the male community who I think sort of over-objectify women and treat them really like they're things rather than people. So it would just mainly be for them, and it would make them realise that actually women are like men in the sense that they have a personality and they have feelings, and they don't really like parts of their body being shouted about in the street.
You worked as a psychiatric nurse for 10 years, I think. But hardly a day goes by now without some new horror story about the NHS, you know, whether it's involving neglect of elderly patients in one form or another, etc. Do you really believe that we have the right system in this country, the right, the best model?
I do believe we have the best model. I don't actually think it's a complicated picture now because of the huge, great swathes of the NHS that have been privatised. And I'm not saying that all the bad things going on in the NHS, and there are a few, if not more than a few bad things going on in the NHS, they're not all about privatisation either, but I think they're about a combination of things that involve pressure to perform. And I think a lot of the bad things that have gone wrong, for example, in North Staffs, what that's about is targets. And it's about managers at all costs trying to meet targets and bollocks to the consequences. Can I say that on this?
Yes, of course.
Okay, sorry. So that what they've done is they've not really cared about the basics that are going on in this great quest to be seen by the government to be achieving their targets.
If you one day look back on your life, which will seem more important to you, do you think? Your earlier role as a nurse or your later role as a celebrity comedian?
Oh, you call me a celebrity comedian.
Am I allowed
what
to
a great, yes you are, what a great combo. Well, I think they're kind of inextricably interlinked, but I would probably say comedian because as a comic and as someone that does telly and that, you have access to a very wide audience. And I would like to think that actually having been a nurse and looked after people with mental health problems, I have somehow fought their corner a bit because I have, a bit of a public audience, if you like. So who knows? I think it's vain to think that comedians can make a difference politically. But I mean, I'd like to think people that know what I do know that I was a nurse, and they know that I think it's wrong to bully people with mental health problems or to stigmatise them, and that we should be a more inclusive society. So if I've added to that kind of even like a weeny bit that someone sort of thought, oh, maybe I won't shout something abusive at someone with mental health problems, then I feel that is useful.
I think it was Thomas Edison who said that comedy is genius, is 1% inspiration, 99% perspiration. Does the same go for comedy, do you think, or is it more fun than that?
It's more fun than that. I mean, I think the thing about comedy is actually comedians are made up of very different types of personality, and you have got your sloggers who work endlessly, even though they probably haven't got comedy bones. And then down the other end of the spectrum, you've got people who are extremely funny people, but they're incredibly lazy, and they don't really bother to write jokes. So let's take some some examples. I mean, I knew a stand-up back in the 1980s when I was sort of first starting off. He wrote the most brilliant material, but he was terrible at delivering it. So he ended up paddling in the waters of, obsolescence, really, right from the kickoff. Whereas you've got other comics who their material might be basically a bit crap and a bit dull, but their personality is so huge that they even make dross seem like comedy gold.
Where do you fit onto that scale, do you think?
Oh, blimey. Well, I'm quite lazy, but I wouldn't say I'm one of those inspired people with a kind of big personality who doesn't work hard, because I do have to work at it as well. So I'd say I'm hovering somewhere around the centre point of that continuum.
Yeah. I think a lot of comedy routines are presented as things that actually happen to the comedian.
Yes.
So how much of your work is based on real events?
I'd say like about 85% of my work is, I tend to set up, if I'm doing a routine, I will set up a joke with the truth, but the punchline is normally a lie. So, for example, I did once pull the windscreen wipers off the van of some builders who were shouting abuse at me. That is true. But the ensuing comments I might make about whatever I did to them after that, or whatever happened, probably aren't true. So, am I allowed to drink coffee on this?
Of course you are. Is it coffee?
It is.
What, are you a coffee drinker?
Yes, I am
clearly,
a coffee drinker.
I've never got the taste. It's too bitter, isn't it?
Tea?
No.
You don't drink coffee or tea?
Well, it's,
You're weird.
Coke and vodka, isn't it, nowadays?
Yeah.
Moving on, a former head of the army, I think, described your controversial joke, which suggested...
Head of the army?
Yeah, Prince Harry... Well, when he suggested Prince Harry takes cocaine, he said that was outrageous, unfortunate, I've got written down, and most inappropriate. So are comedians forced to tread more carefully now, do you think, and particularly if working for the BBC?
Well, I think that what happens these days is communications are better. So virtually as soon as a joke is out of your mouth in a club in Middlesbrough, it's all over the country.
It
on
wasn't
Twitter.
a club in Middlesbrough, was it? It was...
No, it was Have I Got News for You?
It was a hit BBC One television programme.
Yeah, well, first of all, I didn't write that joke, because what happens with Have I Got News for You is they write a script, and if you're the presenter, you come in on the day and you say, I like that joke, I don't like that joke. I'm a Republican, so I see a joke taking the mick out of the royals. I tend to go for that one if it's a good joke. So I liked that joke about Harry. I thought it was hilarious. And actually, who cares what some old head of the army thinks? Certainly not me. I mean, the fact to me is the royal family are natural targets. They don't really lift a finger. They say they do. They seem to think that going to charity events is hard work. I can tell you, I go to charity events, it's not hard work. What's hard work is working in a factory and not earning the minimum wage. We support the royal family because we pay our taxes, and they use our money to live on. And they own all this land and all these castles, and in my book, that's really unfair. And the very least they could do is be gracious about having the piss taken out of them. I don't care either way if Harry's had cocaine or not. I wasn't implying he had. It was just a play on words. Yeah. So,
So perhaps the criticism was unjust and it didn't get to you.
No, because actually I didn't read it, so I don't know what anyone said. What they normally say is, I wish that sort of fat old menopausal old, they normally say lesbian, even though I've been married for a very long time now, would shut her mouth and, be nice, get back to the kitchen, start wearing a pinny, do some cooking, learn her place, and various other cliches like that.
Present company accepted.
Yes.
Who was or is the best comedian ever?
Oh God, now that is a really, really hard question, I think, because to me, comedians are... A comedian is someone that different comedians can be used for different occasions. So, for example, I love John Higley, who is a comedy poet and has always been, to some extent, the comedian's comedian, because all comics know who he is and love him, but very few people would know who he was because he's not been on telly. So him, for example, I would say very high up there. But sometimes you don't want comedy poetry. You want someone a bit mad that kind of growls at you and makes you feel a bit scared while you're watching them. Yeah. So for those purposes, you might choose someone like Frankie Boyle and say they're the best comedian. Although, you know, I do take issue with some of the lines that he's done recently. Like the Rebecca Adlington one, for example, I didn't like that, and I didn't like the joke about Katie Price either. I think Billy Connolly is a brilliant comedian, but you know, no comedian's perfect. Billy Connolly's very friendly with the royal family, and I wouldn't be given the opportunity. So no one's ever 100% perfect. They're great, but there are always...
Is it the role of other comedians to let someone know if they don't like a certain joke or if they don't like what they're doing? For example, you mentioned with Frankie Boyle, you would you see it as your position to then say, raise concern?
If I were on a show with them and they did a line that I didn't like, I would say something, but I wouldn't go out of my way to phone him up and go, didn't really like that joke, you know. I don't think it is the responsibility. I have said to people in the past that I didn't like certain stuff that they'd done, but I think if you set yourself up as the arbiter of what is acceptable and what's not, you end up kind of being like a headmistress, really.
Has someone got that responsibility? Is it the public's? Is it?
Well, I think the thing is actually it is the public's responsibility. It's not even their responsibility, but it is their right to complain about something like that, as it's everybody's right to, you know. So I'm a member of the public, so I could complain if I wanted to.
Do you ever go and see young comedians and support upcoming talent?
No. The reason I don't, is not because I don't like young comedians, it's because I have a very busy life and my children are still relatively young, and I simply don't have the time to go out when I'm not working and see young comedians, but I do see quite a lot of them in various places where I am working from time to time. So I kind of have a vague idea of who the up-and-coming ones are, but please don't ask me what their names are because I don't have a working memory at the moment.
I could do that spectacular prank where I give you a few names and I say, what do you think of X?
And you say, I pretend I know them.
Yes, and they don't exist.
No, that would be very good if you did that.
Yeah. Do you see other comedians though? Do you see comedy at all, or is it just time constraints prove that, you know?
I tend to, the time I see other comedians really, apart from the ones that I'm friendly with, are when I do a massive great benefit at the O2, like the one that they do for Great Ormond Street once a year, where you've got 20 people on the bill, and so you kind of catch up with everybody in one fell swoop, really, which is quite good.
Your voice is a pretty
like
distinctive.
Like a bloke's. I must. On the phone, I do get called Sir quite a lot.
Right. But it is a distinctive part of you. Is it totally natural, or have you cultivated it a bit?
No, I haven't cultivated it at all. How would I do that? What do you mean, like voice coaching or something?
Well, I don't know. It's just you must use it as, you know, part of some routines. Or as
Yeah. No, I haven't done anything, but I might do now. Yeah. Hello, is that the voice coach? Could you make my voice even more like a man's than it is? No, I haven't. What an interesting thought. Maybe I'll do that.
Yeah. To what extent have the alternative comedians, do you think, who began their careers sort of railing against the establishment, now become conformists?
Oh, that's a good question. Well, I think it varies a lot, really, because I think some have become conformists internally and externally. Some have become conformists externally only. And a few not at all. I think the thing is, as you age, you inevitably appear to be more conformist than you are because you look older and people think you've grown up a bit. But I would say at the time of alternative comedy, there were quite a few comics on the circuit who actually weren't really alternative comedians, but they just pretended to be for the sake of being swept along by the, the tide of enthusiasm and anti-Thatcherism. Yeah. So they are quite happy just to pad back to what it was like before in some ways. Whereas I think sort of the leading lights of the alternative comedy circuit, Ben Elton, for example, Rick Mail and all that lot, they've kind of clung on to the core of themselves, but they've had to kind of earn their money how they can. I mean, there's some sort of old adage, isn't there, that says, if you're I don't know, how does it go? If you're a socialist when you're 20, then
you haven't got if you're not a socialist when you're 20, you haven't got a heart, and if you're not a
Tory
when you're older, you haven't got a head.
Yes,
that's it. So
that's right.
Do you believe that?
No. I don't really. I think some people do. Also you had sort of journalists like Gary Bushell, for example, who's not really around much anymore, but when he was very young, he was extremely left-wing. Yeah. Sort of almost Workers' Revolutionary Party or more left-wing than that. But now is extremely right-wing. People boomerang backwards and forwards, which I find quite a weird concept, really.
Have you boomeranged?
No.
You've always been on the left.
Always been on the left, yes.
And you're known to be a devoted supporter of the Labour Party now.
Yeah, that's not without the caveat that I've struggled to support them on occasions. But I think two things which inform my attitude towards them: pragmatism. Because the alternative is never going to have any political power, because it's never going to be big enough, certainly not in my lifetime. So pragmatism, and also just a sense of being a bit more liberal about the whole thing. And I mean with a small L, not a big L, just accepting people are human and they are going to mess up. But on occasion they've messed up really badly, just pulling back from it all, I suppose.
Would you be happy to see Ed Miliband as our next Prime Minister?
Yeah, I think the whole issue of Ed Miliband is a really difficult and complex one, because Ed Miliband's a really decent, nice bloke, right? But as they always do, the right-wing press have created a caricature out of him, like they did with Michael Foot. And when you actually make a political figure into a caricature, it's really difficult for the public to take them seriously. Because as soon as you start sort of banding around stuff like Wallace and Gromit, or look at his haircut or whatever, those people are reduced in people's heads to almost, to a cartoon, really. And I think that then makes it difficult for them to make serious political points without some commentator going, oh, but look, he's got curry on his tie, or whatever it is. So I think that's a big issue for Ed Miliband and his supporters to think about, really.
That is part of society, isn't it? Getting that criticism, getting that sort of undeserved, almost media attention that's surrounding you, perhaps a lot of it being negative. It's part of how politics works. So is it somewhat up to Ed to overcome that and show that he isn't what they're portraying him to be?
You say it's part of how politics works, but it actually isn't how it used to work. Okay. I mean, if you look at, let's go down the he's no oil painting route. I mean, Harold Wilson, Jim Callaghan, none of them were Tony Blair's, were they? In fact, Tony Blair's the only Tony Blair there's been, really. And so any kind of awkward... Tony Blair was like such a smooth operator. He was like a lawyer, which he is, and a TV presenter and a male model all kind of rolled into one. He was kind of so smooth that he sort of set the benchmark for party leaders, and that's obviously where Cameron's done well, because Cameron, obviously not quite a Tony Blair, but age-wise and kind of hair-wise and all the rest of it, not that far off, And I think the other thing about Ed is that I know he went to a comprehensive, but I think he does come across slightly posh as well. And I think Tony Blair managed not to be as posh as he probably is, because that's something, again, and I think Cameron's sort of really muffled his poshness, as it were.
I think there was a case of him deliberately being grammatically incorrect or something, or just to appeal to the court.
Yeah, well, that would figure. But in these days, the press is so sophisticated, communication is so instant that actually you can't get away with anything. And in the old days, a lot of the gaffes that have been made, that have happened in the last few years, wouldn't have been made because there wouldn't have been anyone there sticking a microphone up someone's nose.
On a different note, what does your work as a patron for the National Self-Harm Network involve?
Well, I think I'm patron of a lot of charities, and when I talk to other comics or actors or whatever, that the advice that they tend to bandy around is only be patron of a few things. And then you can really get stuck in and work for them. Whereas with me, I've decided to go the other route of saying yes to pretty much everything, but making it clear that that I have no time at all, on the whole, to do events and that sort of thing. And so,
is it more name recognition, associating yourself with the charity?
I think what it's about is that charities these days are, for all I know, I'm not a patron of the National Self-Harm Network. You could be having me on here because I've said yes to so many. But what I think, what I think happens these days, and I think it's a shame in a way, is that charities feel they can't get any recognition or attract people to support them unless they have a so-called celebrity figurehead. And so I think to myself, well, is it better to say yes to that, or is it better just to say no to all these 200 people that have asked me in the last 6 months, and just concentrate on a few charities? And I don't know that I've got it right particularly, but I do tend to say yes and then say to them, look, if I can do a benefit for you, I will, but it's odds on I probably can't for a bit, at least. So who knows? I don't know what the answer is, really.
But the issues that you say yes to, they're normally close to your heart.
They tend to be in the area of mental health and the elderly. And the reason they're in the area of mental health is because first of all, I think it's a slightly what people would consider, because being totally honest, really, I think fluffy charities are much more appealing. So charities to do with babies, children, animals are much more appealing than charities to do with mental health issues, to some extent physical disability, and also big charities like Oxfam are more attractive than small charities based in the middle of nowhere in Norfolk, say. So I've tried to go to the less fluffy charities outside London because I don't think they get much of a look in.
Finally, is there anything completely unrelated to your work that you'd like to learn to do or experience?
Oh, what a great question. What would I like to learn to do? Yeah, I'd like to learn how to hack a computer. Can you teach me?
No idea.
No. Can you put me in touch with someone that can?
I'm sure we could.
That'd be great. Get back to me.
What would you use those abilities for?
To bring down the American government. Not really. No, I think actually if I knew how to hack a computer, it would mean that I was much more conversant with the whole world of electronic communication than I actually am, which is basically clinging on by my fingertips like a sad old grandma who's living in the 20th century. Because I don't have any time, so I'd like to go on a course and learn a lot more about how it all works, but just don't have time. So yeah, that's a great idea. If only there was a hacking a computer course, I'd be straight on that, actually.
Call this number now.
Yeah, exactly.
Jo Brand, thank you very much. I really appreciate your time.
No, you're very welcome.
Great, thank you so
Cheers.
much. I was practicing impressions on the train down.
Go on then.
Well, do you want to take the role of me?
Yes.
And you can ask me a question, I'll try and answer it.
So have I got to do an impression of you?
Well, yes.
Okay. Right. I'm going to ask you a question. As if you were Jo Brand.
Yes, so I'm Jo Brand.
Okay.
And you've got one shot at a question because Jo Brand's very busy.
Good afternoon, Jo Brand. Now, can you tell me what you think of Nigel Farage?
Well, if I was... That's not so good.
That's terrible.
That's awful. Hang on.
I'll try and look away.
Let me get it right. Right, here we go. I met Nigel Farage last year. This is absolutely atrocious, isn't it? Right,
was he doing it quite well on the train?
I was doing it all right, wasn't I?
Yeah.
It was okay. I did watch Alistair McGowan do you, and that was fantastic. What
was he any good?
He was absolutely wonderful. Just because he was talking about things that you would talk about. So, for example, on politics,
cake and all.
Cake
and men.
He was talking about the Labour Party.
Oh, okay.
So, what did he say? If I was leader of the Labour Party, how would I get rid of the threat of Nick Griffin?
I'd eat him.
Yes,
I remember that one now. Yeah.
But no, he was very good. No, I can't do it. Okay, that's pretty
all right. Well, we tried anyway.
We gave it a shot.
I thought my impression of you was rather good.
I thought it was all right. Yeah. We can cut that whole chunk out. Right.